No, I'll kind of just like, I'm gonna walk to different parts in here. We'll just kind of hang out in front of this pub right now. And so I said, thank you so much. So this is my testimony. Thank you for being here. It's funny how God works in mysterious ways. This was actually part of a competition, and I felt like God was like, I want to use it. So yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm not going to tell you a ton, but for time's sake. But I grew up in a home where we kind of did whatever we wanted to an extent. Never went to church, and there was no mention of God in my household ever. I had a lot of like Spanish stuff that was like swords and stuff. I'm not Spanish, but my dad was into like medieval stuff because he went to Spain, and so there was like these exposed beams and swords and pictures of conquistadors. It just had a dark vibe to it. It was cool though, because sometimes when the babysitter would come, they'd bring their boyfriends there, and they would start drinking beer and pulling off the swords and having sword fights. So it got a little crazy, and so like I said, when I was younger, I got a series of book when I was really young, and it was called The Mysteries of the Unknown by Time Life Books. I really liked those books at the time. They were actually about the paranormal. Each book focused on different topics such as ghosts, UFOs, psychic powers, and dreams. And so at a very early age, not growing up in a Christian home, I was exposed to paranormal stuff. And so I just got into it. I started like those choose your own adventure books, and I was an artist. I was always drawing, and so I just had a creative mind. Um, I was just like really lost and kind of awkward as a kid. And so at an early age, like I said, even when I remember one Christmas, we got the Milton Bradley Ouija board for Christmas. Sounds like board. And so now I think back at all this stuff, and I'm just like, man. And we just didn't have godly boundaries in our home, and so we watched whatever we wanted, ever. I'd watch some weird stuff as a kid. I would watch like Faces of Death. I mean, like just really bad stuff that was like banned in other countries. And so just the stuff that I was putting into my mind was not good at all. And so and of course we rebelled at an early age. We didn't have any rules in my house. And so right around 14, I started smoking weed and drinking and just doing all kinds of stuff. And so I was just did whatever I wanted. And so let's fast forward way, way many years later, many, many, many. And so I remember it all started at the time I'm in Florida, and I've been to different cities prior to that. I'm not going to tell my whole life story, but this is relevant to the testimony. So I remember sister would send me tracks in Florida. I don't remember if they were mixed in with gifts or a card. I always thought they were super weird. And so when I would see them, I would just like throw them away. I was like, this is weird. Again, I don't believe in God. I don't know who Jesus is at all. Um, so I guess at that point in my life, this felt like a dark cloud was always following me. Everything seemed overcast in my sky. So it was just, everything just felt difficult, and I had a sense of heaviness a lot. And so there was one time prior to living in Florida, I wrote in a journal, letter to God while living in Chicago, living a really fast lifestyle, and asking him for things and answers. I'm not sure if this was some form of new age solution, but I figured I can contact this way. And so I wish I still had it. I think some of them maybe came true, but I just wrote in there. I was just like, God, are you real? Help me do this. Can you, again, I didn't know any better. And so I figured I could make contact with God this way. So most of my life at this time spent working as a bartender in bars and clubs and basically just partying with my friends. And so at this time of my life where we're at right now, I'm living at the beach, and it seemed to be a stress-free life. I had no real future plans, just weekend to weekend. And sometimes I'd watch people come to the bar. Let's actually go in the bar. Let's go in here, change it up a little bit. I'll be right back. I gotta grab something. Hold on. All right. Trying to work my way in there. But yeah, feel free to come into the pub. Not every day do a church service in a bar. And so like I said, I was a bartender, and sometimes I'd watch people come into the bar, and I would always think that they weren't free. They were like trapped in this 9 to 5 system. I really did. I had people come sometimes, like an older couple would come in, and then he would come in by himself. His wife had passed away. I'd seen people just, I did hear all their stories. I'm the bartender, and yeah, so basically, I just thought they were all trapped in this 9 to 5 system. And while I was aimlessly roaming the beach carefree, I was just bar hopping, attempting to surf all the time. I was playing music with my friends in a band, even though we never did a show. We were in the studio once, and then that went south. Like I said, nothing ever just panned out in my life. And so maybe God answered my sister's prayers because she actually, when she got saved, which is a result of Heenables, she prayed for me for 7 years. It's 7 years of just sending tracks, all that stuff. And so whether it's her prayer of 7 years or me just writing in that journal, I won't know. And so I won't get into all the details, but one night I was out with my friends and I felt like everything around me was like closing in. And so maybe I watched too many paranormal shows, but something just felt really off. Like it was kind of scary. I can't explain it. It was just like there were some weird presences around. That's all I can say. And so basically, I'm walking down these cobblestone streets in Old Town in Florida, and I walked right up to this historic church, and the stained glass window, like it started glowing, and like light was like penetrating out of it, and I can make the figure out as like a representation of Jesus in the artwork. It was like definitely some supernatural stuff. And again, I know what you're thinking. He's a bartender. He's partying. Like, what is he on? I'm sure I just had some drinks that night, so it wasn't like I was doing some real crazy stuff, which I was kind of new to. But yeah, and so this thing happened. It was really odd. And so after that happened, I noticed that anytime I was out driving or riding my beach cruiser by a church, and we'll head back outside because, like I said, I want to change it up a little bit. Everyone knows I move around a lot, but so if you look up there, you'll kind of see that church and that cross glowing. So yeah, so every time basically what happened, I would be just driving or riding my beach cruiser by a church, and the actual cross on the building start illuminating or blurring around the sides. Can't explain it, but it was like drawing me in. Even if it was an abandoned or historic church that was shut down, the same thing would happen. The cross just would start like glowing. And again, if you're in design where you can like blur stuff out, it was like that. It was like this blur thing happening. It was super weird, but it always happened. Again, I don't go to church. I don't believe in God, and this keeps happening. So I'm just like, what in the world's happening? And so, yeah. So every time I would see these crosses just like that, it wouldn't look just like that. They would just start blurring and like it was like drawing me in. And so after basically 3 days of events, felt like I was like in this whirlwind of emotions and despair. I just felt super restless, like I was going to jump out of my skin at any moment, not in a good way. So it just felt like I can't explain it, but it felt like overall torment for like 3 days. It just felt like way off, and I'm seeing these like cross things happening. I just felt like I can't explain it. Those 3 days, I was like, "What is going on? Was something wrong with me?" And so let's head back over here to this piece of crap car I used to have. Basically, what's interesting too about the church stuff, I did a graphic design internship in the city. Out on all my lunch break, I would sit down on the steps of a closed down historic church. I was scared. For some reason, I felt like something there would protect me. And so maybe that stained glass ordeal had something to do with it, or this cross thing happening. And so, so one night, what happens was I was driving my Pontiac Sunfire towards the beach. It had no AC, and so when it would rain in Florida, Florida, I'd put up the windows and I'd literally just sweat to death. It was brutal. And so from what I remember, I just felt off that night, those 3 days, and it felt super strange. And so I pulled into a parking lot in this car, and I was on the way towards A1A, Beach Run Avenue, Vanilla Ice rap lyric that Heenables know. And I called my sister and I told her how I was feeling. And she somehow got me to say some form of the sinner's prayer. And basically, do you want to chime in here, or is that what you did? I just want to make sure. I haven't told my testimony since then, so it's kind of hard for me to. I'm going to put you on megaphone just in case I'm missing anything. because you're so yeah. So hopefully you have a good memory. What happened when I called you?
Um, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I don't have a good memory at all, so you're putting me on the spot here. But all I can remember is, the 7 years praying and just trying to convince you and push a lot. And, through that process, God was teaching me also, to have patience and, to wait on his time. And it was just around that time where things just started getting really heavy with you. And I started just really interceding, and God was teaching me how to intercede. And, I would even pray, like, God, like when he's at the bar, like, if he's drinking, have him sober up so he sees the truth. And it would actually happen. Like, he would be like, I'm drinking. And all of a sudden, like, I'm not drunk anymore. And so a lot of just my prayers were for God to show up supernaturally. And that's what he was seeing. But I think he got to that place where he wasn't scared, but in a sense he was, where he's like, what do I do? Like, God is like, wow, he's seriously real. And so I kind of just said, yeah, I don't remember what I said to you, but it was in the sense of, Jesus died for you. Do you want to accept him in your heart today? And and you,
Okay.
went through whatever we talked about. And then
That's
it
cool.
was almost, we were on the phone. And when he prayed over the phone, like I remember till this day, it felt like electricity hit like through the line of the phone. Like it was that intense. It was crazy, crazy good.
Cool. Thank you so much. So yeah, so again, she doesn't know all the details. I'm just checking. It's my sister. I can give her a hard time. I appreciate it. But so yeah, on the phone, I was just like, dude, I don't feel well. Like I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't know what's going on. Like everything just felt crazy for 3 days. And so she just had me do the sinner's prayer. Like, do you believe in Jesus? I'm like, I don't know who he is. Sure. Do you believe? I did the sinner's prayer and I prayed it. And so what is interesting, I accepted Jesus on the phone in this crappy Pontiac Sunfire. And luckily it wasn't raining, so I wasn't sweating inside this thing with no AC. But as soon as I was done with that prayer, instantly after I ended the prayer, when I opened the car door, I looked up at the sky and it looked different. It was like that crazy. It didn't. It wasn't like a subtle change, but it was like a brand new sky, almost like a spiritual veil had been ripped off my eyes. And the stars and constellations were really vivid, and just it looked like a brand new sky. As soon as I said it, instantly, and I was so excited about it that I literally left my car in the parking lot and I started walking towards the beach, which was probably like a 30-minute walk with this warm wind blowing in Florida and this overall presence of peace I've never felt. And so basically, once I was on the beach with the waves crashing and this overwhelming presence with me, I felt true peace for the first time in my life. And I just remember being on the beach and just the sky looked really crazy. I remember not physically yelling, but I was asking basically God to help me with all of my being. Like I was like yelling from the inside. So anyway, so at that point, it felt like hours of God's supernatural presence. The sky lit up over the ocean. I started to make my way back to the car. So we'll head over here to this little area. We got some Guinness, we got pizza. And so I went to the store and I picked up some beer. I got two pizzas from a pizza shop and I was going to rent a movie. But this is not something I would normally do. I was always out with friends partying. I don't think during the time I lived there with my roommates, we ever even rented a movie and watched it. So I'm not sure if you guys remember Blockbuster. I used to be a fan of the independent film section. And this time when I went in there, it freaked me out. Everything looked different. Just like the sky when I exited the car. All the horror films, actually, most of the movies seemed extremely demonic and scary. And I was just like, what am I going to watch? I was literally like scared. I was afraid to even look at some of the covers because I could just see good and evil. I don't know if God was showing me, but I could see it and I was like scared. It's not like that for me now. Now I kind of have discernment. Like, yeah, I should probably want to. Maybe I shouldn't rent the one with the pentagram on the cover. I'm just joking, but at that moment, it just felt very different. And so something was happening to me. And so something caught my eye, and there was a movie, this one right here called The End of the Spear. I have no idea what it was. I just knew that I was supposed to rent it. And so I had no clue. So we rented it. And so I arrived home, and one of my roommates was there, which was rare for a weekend. And then we watched this movie, if you've never seen it before, about forgiveness and the Amazon jungle, missionaries and Indians while he ate his free pizza. And somehow I was off for 3 days in a row. And so I took a road trip in town by the beach. I had this huge cross that I wanted to explore the next morning. And so basically in St. Augustine, Florida, there's this huge cross, and it's called the Great Cross. It's built of 70 tons of stainless steel plates. It's packed with concrete in its lower third to prevent toppling by hurricanes. It's part of the Shrine of Our Lady of La Lite. I don't know what that means. And its height was designed so that everyone near St. Augustine could see and be reminded of the religious beginning of our nation, according to the plaque. So I'm freshly saved. I'm on my little field trip here. And the plaque at the base of the cross, which is 200 feet high, says that it marks the approximate site where in 1565 the cross of Christianity was first permanently planted in what is now the United States. So over a half century before, pilgrims even touched their toes in Plymouth Rock. So I'll make this real clear. I don't worship crosses. I worship Jesus. Even the pictures of Jesus are only representations of him. And I sometimes, if you've been to our world builds, I'll add famous paintings in the world builds because I like art and it's a visual reference to something from the Bible. And so, but these are just pictures. And the cross was an instrument, during that time, was an instrument of death. And so this large cross that people were seeing in St. Augustine is like a beacon of faith to remind all those who pass this way by land or sea of this religious beginning of our nation. And so, again, which is super odd, is that I wrote down my testimony for the first time yesterday, and I researched what that cross was because I never knew what it was. So you're kind of hearing that. And so Father Lopez was the first pastor to describe the landing and settlement here on September 8th, 1565. And as I had come ashore the evening before I took across and went to meet Captain General Menendez, singing the hymn Idum Laudamus, which I'm probably butchering. It's like this hymn. Again, I don't know if it's Catholic or what it is. It's this old hymn about faith. And the general, followed by all who accompanied him, marched up to the cross. He knelt and kissed it, and many of the Indians watched these proceedings and imitated all they saw done. So, like I said, I to research all this. I didn't even know what it was. And so I'm walking around these gardens by the Intercoastal Waterway, but nothing there really changed me. I saw this Catholic store. It sold relics of all types and books about the Pope. But for some reason, the cross was drawing me to something more. I just didn't know what the next steps were. And so basically the next day I'm off again, which is not typical. And so I'm over here now in a kayak. I jump around a lot. And so the next day I'm off again, which is not typical because I'm always bartending. So I rented a kayak at the beach and I paddled out as far as I could. I'm just like floating in these crashing waves. I'm kind of way out there. And everything just felt more vivid and powerful. And I was kind of pondering everything in the ways that happened. And then I heard these words. It said, "Be still." Not an audible voice. I don't hear God like audibly in that way. We all have a personal relationship with God, and so he speaks to us in different ways. And so I heard, "Be still." I mean, again, in a way, something spoke to me in thoughts, a peaceful voice. And I had no idea what it meant. I later Googled what it was. I'm not even sure I had a Bible yet. I didn't know anything about Jesus, church culture, how to act like a Christian in general. And I always, to this day, feel like an outcast in churches. And so the only time spent in a church as a kid, or, every once in a while, we would go to the church at the end of our street and play basketball. Maybe the pastor never gave me the opportunity to receive Christ, or I just spiritually didn't have ears to hear, eyes to see. It was all about potlucks. So Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still, know that I am God." So I'm just like having this profound moment because I don't know anything about the Bible. So I found this scripture and I thought God was communicating with me. And as simple as this phrase was, to be still, just basically let him orchestrate what was next. And so again, my sister calls me again this time and says, well, you're saved now. You need to go to a church. And I'm like, really? I don't want to go to church. And she's like, so she picked a church by the beach called the Beach's Vineyard. At that time, it was next to a store that sold liquor and snacks. So on the weekend, when all my friends partying, I'd be going to this prayer ministry deal on Fridays. And sometimes I'd see my friends I knew picking up stuff at the store. I kind of tried to hide. Like I literally would hide behind the wall so they wouldn't see me enter this church. So I was still working at this bar, now being a believer. And we could go back in the bar now for this story. So yeah, so now I'm still working at this bar, and I'm a believer now, and everything seemed heightened when I would work here, like out of control. There were times I'd have to help a guy passed out in the bathroom stall that was locked, and like literally drag him, under the stall and call him a cab. There was one occurrence. I'm not joking. I'm bartending. This guy comes in when someone walks in the bar with a wooden crucifix in hand. It's like this big, and he handed it to the owner of the bar, telling her it would protect her from evil. I'm just like, what the heck's going on? I'm like, I need to get out of this place. And so again, I don't want this to make this seem, if you are in the service industry, that this is against that. It's not. This is just my testimony. And so I had times where I won't get into it, but I started working for a church. I'm not going to get all that. And I was bartending at the same time. I just didn't know and didn't care. Be like, you need to come to this church meeting. I'm like, nah, I'm bartending that night. And I'm always been kind of a rebel. So that's just me. But anyway, so all this crazy stuff's happened at this bar. I'm like, I just need to get out of here. And so I kept this laminated card. Maybe my sister gave me. It had some Psalms in it. It was in my wallet. So when I was feeling like super uneasy or anxious, I'd like read these scriptures like secretly in the bathroom or in the bar. And sometimes when I was just real anxious during the weekend when all my friends were out partying, I was just like, what am I doing? I have like no friends right now. And basically I would just read the Bible and like Psalms and stuff, and I would just fall asleep, right? And I would just wake up refreshed with peace instead of hanging out with my friends at night. So, but I'm super raw. I'm reading the Bible in a Russian roulette way. I don't know anything. I just openly read the Bible, open it, and then I read it. That's all I knew at this time. That's what I did. I know nothing. I just open it and be like, oh, sounds good. Leviticus. This is interesting. But so anyway, so I was going to church every Sunday and bartending, and I was going to these prayer meetings on Fridays. And so that less than a month in, a young guy was talking about doing mission work in India. You'll see the picture right there on the wall over there. Um, and I was just like, he's talking about doing mission work in India on a Sunday, and I was like, God would never use me in that way. I'm like just too crazy at that time of my life. I don't know anything. And at that moment, a lady, I don't know if it was a pew, it was a seat. She turned around, stared me in the eyes, and said, "We're going." I was like, this lady's crazy. And so I was at one of the prayer ministry meetings on Friday. It was just worship music, and people would walk around praying for people or just alone in prayer. Sometimes someone would approach you and pray or would pray for others. There was always an overwhelming presence of God there. And this Asian girl just comes up to me and she approached me with a check and said, I feel God wanted me to give this to you. So it was my first donation towards my trip. And sure enough, all the donations came and I was on my way to India. And so I let the owners of the bar know that I was going to India. They just thought I was freaking nuts. I'm like, I need some time off. I need like 2 weeks. I'm going to India. And they were like, that sounds great. Take some time off. And so I'd never been out of the country. Not even sure I knew how to pray, but I remember seeing God's love for the first time. We were in Calcutta, and it was, one of the poorest cities. Calcutta is just one of the poorest cities in the world where Mother Teresa used to minister. And there were cows walking around with sunken in ribs because you can't eat the cows, they're holy. There was garbage everywhere. There was rickshaws and motorcycles and pollution and, just cars just driving crazy style. I remember one time someone opened up a cab and a bunch of chickens all bloody just came running out of the car. I'm like, what is going on in this place? And so it was the first time I experienced culture shock. It was just, and so it was an eye-opening experience. There was constant power outages. We'd be in Calcutta, just walking down the street and the whole city would just go black. And you're just like, what in the world? Am I gonna get like mugged? But I don't know anything. I'm just freshly saved. And so this is my first experience of culture shock. It was amazing. And so I saw God's love for the orphans and the orphanages in Calcutta. And they all seemed so happy. They had something about them that they were just happy. I mean, they were in a bad scenario, but they just happy. And so we ended up staying by the border of Bangladesh in a town not far from the Himalayan mountains called West Bengal. Now, the rest of the trip, we're at another orphanage, and I won't tell the whole story. This all connects the dots. But I decided I wanted to help paint murals. So I did Noah's Ark in the girls' room in the orphanage. I did some like abstract Disney looking Jesus in the main room while the others were out. And it was Asian wall paint. And so the fumes were so strong to the point I felt like I wanted to faint when I was doing it. I definitely don't recommend it. So I'm curious if it's even been painted over since then. So if you walk through the village and you see the orphanage, you can see this picture of Jesus. And there's like a heart on him. There's like blood dripping out of his hand into this water. It's abstract. And so anyway, I come back from India. It's totally wrecked me. There was times they would ask me to pray, and I just didn't because I didn't know how to pray. Just didn't know what to do. And so I got back to the pub, and they had replaced me with another bartender. So now I'm basically out of a job. Before I knew it, I was moving out of my place, long story short, into a home of two Christian surfers from the church I attended. And I stopped hanging out around all my friends I used to, and the rest is kind of history. And honestly, there was a lot of mistakes made along the way. Being alone was part of my life at that time. I just didn't have any friends, and it wasn't easy. And I felt like I just didn't fit in. Or even if I tried to make friends with someone that didn't share my beliefs, I'd be right back where I started into the same things I was trying to avoid. So sometime later, I went on to a missions trip. Actually, let's go up to the top. Let's change it up a little bit. If you can get up the steps here. Yeah, so sometime later, I went on a missions trip. And if anyone's down there, yeah, we're just upstairs hanging out in the pub. And so sometime later, I went on a missions trip to the Amazon jungle. I had been to Zambia, Africa prior to that, teaching HIV education. And I'm not going to get into all my story, but I invited this girl I was friends with to come from college, and she thought I was really poor because I was like, bartending. I wasn't making a lot of money, and I'm going back to college. So God's doing stuff in my life for the better. And she thought I was poor, I think, because she always shared her organic snacks with me. And the funny thing, she wasn't even Christian, but I just didn't know any better. And so I invited her. I'm like, let's go to the Amazon jungle. She's not even Christian. And so she ends up coming to the mission meetings at the tail end of the trip. So I started inviting her to church prior and was praying for her a lot. And then one day I couldn't make it on Sunday, and something happened, I guess. And so I met her at the coffee shop. I think it was a Starbucks. Her eyes looked different, like something happened. So basically, she gave her life to Jesus that day at church. I wasn't that. And now she's headed to the Amazon jungle to do a missions trip with me on a riverboat. So basically, on that trip, not to get real sappy or anything, we fell in love, even though she had a boyfriend. And the leaders constantly tried to separate us, either out of jealousy or church roles. They would always try to separate me. I was like their camera guy, so I'd go with like the leader, and we'd go into villages and film stuff. And so basically, I just think they were jealous. Honestly, they just kept breaking it up, like boys over here, girls over here, and I was persistent. I was like, nope. I kept coming up to her hammock at night. Obviously, I wasn't creeping on her, but yeah. So anyway, they didn't realize, some years later that she would be my wife. So basically, this is my testimony. Um, it's not all of it, but it's as much as I can recall. And so we're just gonna end with a song outside. I'm gonna pull it up out of the water. I'm just gonna go through a few scriptures. So Matthew 10:32. Whoever acknowledges me for others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. It's kind of hard for me to read these right now. Give me a second. Sorry, man. I'm like a moment. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. old has gone, the new is here. Acts 1:8. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. So, man, I don't know, I just feel the presence of God. I need a second. All right, I gotta put myself together. I'm not an emotional dude, but sometimes these services get me. And so I'm gonna play a song, and during that song, I'm gonna ask you not to hide your testimony, to share it. I used to be embarrassed of mine, and I probably haven't told it since the time it happened. So I'm gonna play this song, and as I pray, if there's someone here that wants to share their testimony this Sunday, we'd love to build a world for you, and you can do that. And so, or if you maybe want to do the Sunday after that. So I just pray, God, right now that your kingdom come, your will be done. I pray, God, if there's anyone in this room during the song that wants to share their testimony or is hiding it or needs to share it, they would do so on Sunday. And I know your plans are greater than ours, Jesus. And so I just pray that your presence would be here, and those that have testimonies that need to be shared, that they would reach out to us. Or maybe no one wants to do it, that's fine. But if you feel called to do it, like I said, get with me after the service, and we'll make this happen. Instead of going to the world build, Nehemiah, we'll do your testimony, because there's power in testimony. Yeah, the world builds are cool, bells and whistles, but I don't want to put out in a box. And we'll wrap it up. So I'll meet you out in the water.
It will make a weak man mighty. It will make a mighty man fall. It will fill your heart and hands, or leave you with nothing at all. It's the eyes for the blind, the legs for the lame. It is love for hate and pride for shame. Now that's the power of the gospel. That's the power of the gospel. That's the power of the mighty, mighty power of that power of the gospel. That's the power of the gospel. Gospel on the water, gospel on the land, the gospel in every woman, and the gospel in every man, gospel in the garden, gospel in the trees, the gospel that's inside of you, and the gospel inside of me. Now that's the power of the gospel. That's the power of the gospel. That's the power of the mighty, mighty power of the gospel. In the hours of richness, in the hours of need, for all of creation comes from the gospel seed. So you may leave tomorrow, and you may leave today, but you've got to have the gospel when you start out on your way. That's the power of the gospel. That's the power of the gospel. That's the power of the mighty power gospel